Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. So on our screen, you can see Jim with Lean Frontiers and Mark Warren. So real quick from me, you will receive a link to view the recording within 24 to 48 hours. That does come directly from me from my email. And we do have some people still logging in, but Jim, if you would like to go ahead and take over, you are more than welcome.
All right, thank you, Skylar, and thanks for joining us again, Mark. I think it was last month, maybe. We kind of had a first round with this discussion and went through a lot, but there's actually a lot more to talk about. And one thing I think is, Mark, you and I have kind of talked a little bit leading up to this conversation. A lot of people think that TWI is about these different programs, JI, JM, JR, that they do, but actually, looking at it from a Toyota perspective, it's much more deeper than that. And in a sense, they took these skills, tools, and made a very unique holistic system out of it. And you're going to kind of talk to that a bit more today.
Okay. It is, I mean, they really did do a holistic way of doing things. So let's see if I can share a screen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Share. Do you have it?
It's coming up. There it is.
Okay. So should I go to presentation mode?
Yep.
That works. Okay.
It's not a presentation mode yet.
Well, it's not.
If it's not cooperating, just run with it.
Okay, well, let me try one more time.
Okay.
Did it work?
Nope, it's still not in presentation mode.
Do you have two monitors, Mark?
Yes, I do.
You may have to pull the one that shows the full slideshow up over to your second monitor. So you may have to switch your monitors.
Okay. Well, let me escape and try again. Stop sharing. I'm just gonna. I'll change monitors with this. Sorry, guys, for watching us struggle with the technology side of things.
That's all right.
Is that working?
So
nope, still your.
It's not presentation mode.
Oh.
Did that work?
Yeah, we can see your notes though.
Yeah, it's got the next slide mode.
Oh, okay.
But
I don't know why it's doing that. So, okay. So I can skip that slide. A little recap. I think last one we went over the TWI programs. And for everybody who's gone through the 10-hour program, we talk about the 5 needs of the supervisor, and we talk about the 3 skill sets, and JI, JR, JM, and they very briefly cover the knowledge portions, and just say, oh, and we, to a large degree, it's kind of brushed off as, oh, that's what everybody has in their factory. And that's some of the differences that I saw in the Toyota stuff. So quick recap is all of the top management, from what I have been told, went through all 3 of the JI, JR, JM programs. And then the upper managers kind of got together and says, well, maybe that's not enough. And so they went through what's called the management training program. And it's 22 sessions. It's weekend sessions. It's almost like a weekend MBA program. So you had 6 months of going in. The very first session, one of the big segments is how to be a leader, not be a boss. And that was iterated again in the, I think, the 18th session, basically recapping leadership over being the boss. So
it's pretty small, hard to see on the screen with
oh,
what it is.
sorry.
It's all right. And also too, one thing when you and I were talking is, and they did this all first before they deployed it. They wanted to get the leadership, not just engaged, but with good understanding of the programs.
Right. So
Should be able to go to display settings, and there should be a way to, I think, present it
okay.
in Zoom.
Is that working better?
Okay, there we go.
Ah,
That's perfect.
okay. I'm glad somebody else is doing that, so well I can concentrate on doing the talking. So one of the things I think I shared in the last slide share piece is a little quick overview of this. And this actually was presented in the Geek Sessions in 2018. So in what?
And you kind of advanced it, which I think you're going to talk about a bit.
Okay. So a lot of what's been driving my research over the last 20 years is a discussion I had with John Shook, and he was basically Toyota's first American employee, and he actually got introduced to TWI back then. But we got together and we were, like a couple of old guys. We was sharing war stories and talking about lean and TWI. And our meeting, instead of being, a short conversation, went on for several hours. And at the end, our summary was, Ono did something different in Toyota that the other companies didn't do. And so I ended up leaving that day with a challenge from John. It's like, so what was Ono doing differently? So basically, for the last 20 odd years, I have been doing not only research, but going into different companies and seeing if I could replicate what Ono was able to do.
And one thing you might explain too that we've talked about, Mark, is the context Ono had and was dealing with, of trying to accomplish, and kind of the reasons behind it and the gap he was trying to deal with.
Okay, so yeah, if I look at these little men, this is his people savings, and he talked about people savings versus labor savings. And one of the things driving that in about 1950, he was looking at the number of people it took to make a car versus what the number of people it took Ford. And he roughly figured it took him about 9 people to do what one person at Ford was doing. So he was under the gun to increase productivity to try to catch up with America. And on top of that, Eiji Toyota he'd had a couple of months at the River Rouge, and he came back and he says, there's no magic at Ford. Yeah, they're so much bigger than we are, but they have the same machinery that we have available to us. Anything that they have that we don't have, we could easily buy it on the open market. So what are we doing wrong? What are we missing? The other piece was in the early 1930s when Ono first joined the Toyota organization in the spinning and weaving group. He got an assignment to go out to one of their competitors who was eating their lunch, proverbially.
In the weaving loom industry, right?
Yeah, it was the weaving industry. And he went in and he started documenting it. And this is where he saw, oh, they're moving things around in small batches, they've got things close together. But also in the weaving, when you're trying to spin the yarn, a lot of times the thread will break. And so you work on training the employee to catch it very fast and retie the knot, and restart the thread. And what he noticed, this company wasn't trying to teach the people how to tie the knots faster, is they were working on how to stop the thread from breaking. So it's a totally different way of thinking. So he had kind of an epiphany there. He didn't understand all the principles of flow at that time. So he had about 10 or 15 years of experimenting with trying to create flow inside Toyota's, well, about 10 years in the spinning group. And then he went to the engine manufacturing of the machining section and started to implement it there. I mean, he made great strides, but it's very difficult to try to create flow. And so when he was introduced to the TWI programs, it's like, I now have a toolbox that I can really get ahead with. And to a large degree, he saw the JIJRJM as a toolbox to help him create flow.
Yeah, it was really, yeah, he saw it as an opportunity to facilitate the flow he'd been trying um, to implement to catch up with the Ford Motor Company.
Well, even to become more competitive in Japan. I mean, so he had like 15 years of practice when he got the TWI program. So he really had a lot of manufacturing experience of making a lot of mistakes and such.
Yeah. Which I think, actually, Mark, I think is a good point, because a lot of times today people look at Toyota and think, in a way, they just kind of maybe flip the switch and there they went. But it was a long, slugging struggle to figure it out.
Yep. So when EG came back from visiting Ford, they said, we need to catch up to Ford in 3 years. That was Ono's edict. And Ono says, well, it actually took me 5. But what I have tried to do over the years is, in my litmus test, is can I go into an organization and use these as a holistic training method, like walking through, and create a 10x improvement. 2x is pretty easy. And I don't care whether you've already been doing lean for years, you got your 6 Sigma black belts or master black belts walking around. It's doubling throughput's usually pretty straightforward in a 90-day period if you actually implement things. And I have a variation on this slide, and I did this at the request of Roger Bilas. I need to give him a hat tip. So the evening after we showed the slide the first time, he came back and told me I went over it way too quickly. And we sat there in a room with sticky notes and put sticky notes on the poster about what are the things that we were doing at each step and each stage in going through. So I don't know if anybody has questions or not about this.
Yeah, certainly have questions. Just put them into the chat.
Okay. So one of the things I need to iterate is the companies that really do well, you absolutely have to have JI. You have to use JR, not as a people fixing piece, but as a problem solving tool, fact finding. You cannot do good improvements until you clearly have defined the sequence of the steps and clearly defined the key points. And when you're trying to do the steps and the key points, you actually pick up a lot of barriers and problems. So you begin to, it's a discovery piece here. And you pick out, and then I use JR to actually detail the problems. And the basic step is I go in and I have, do you have a standard? And I'm not saying you have a SOP or whatever. Have you made a job breakdown? The very first thing I want you to do is make a job breakdown. If the process is not capable, and I'm measuring the rework or sorting in full percentage points, immediately after I've done the job breakdown, I come down here and I start doing the job methods, the challenging, and trying to improve the capability of that process. Once
Mark,
you, yep.
sorry, somebody did pose a question. They asked, what do you mean by make the job easier? Easier, like in quicker, less effort? Can you explain that a little bit further?
Um, so yeah, I want to make it easier for the operator. So my goal with a manager that I'm coaching is like when you make the job breakdown, my long-term goal is I want the job breakdown, the standard that you create to be so easy. Every shortcut an employee tries to invent is going to be harder, difficult, more effort. So your goal is to create something so obvious, so easy, it's a natural way of getting the job done. Does that help them a little bit?
Does it relate to like the one best way?
Yep. So that's the other piece on the we had one question written into us about the one best way. And most people are not aware of the background of the one best way. It's Gilbreth, and even the people who've read a lot of Shingo's work are not aware that Shingo, I mean, this is what's been edited out in the English translations, is Shingo credits his epiphany of thinking about work back to Gilbreth and how he actually looks at the movements, the sequence, the layouts, and trying to simplify things. So if I've gotten a process fairly capable, once I've validated it, I want to come back up here. We'll create a new job breakdown. We'll start training everybody, and then the proactive side of JR is actually coaching and following up and helping the employee grow and succeed at doing the job.
That's really an example of just how you aren't using JI, JR, JM. It's really, you're using them all in tandem with each other.
Yep. So it has to be seamless, really. It has to be so seamless. You cannot, I mean, even though, yes, I do have my pocket cards. And yeah, I just took them out of my pocket because they're so worn out. I don't know if anybody can see but I've got my worn out pocket cards. I pull them out more as an example to tell people, look, if you're uncertain about what to do, pull the card out and think through, am I following these steps? And that's a lot of what I do is I try to get people to follow the patterns. If you follow the patterns, you are improving your success quite a bit. So one of the other pieces, and this is actually a piece from job methods, but in the job methods, you really have to understand the process first and say that JI, this is where you're defining all the key points on this top row. Now, here's the JR where you're actually questioning everything. If you look here, there's actually 5 whys. Only when you have done this top level piece can you really come down and effectively create good standards. And this is kind of where Ono says, without a standard, you can't do any improvement. It's basically, if you haven't done this top piece, you're not going to be able to do this bottom piece. You can pretend like you're doing it, but it's not going to happen.
You may explain further on this, just how, again, this shows an example of how these things work in tandem, not like each one on an individual basis, but you're utilizing parts of each of the skills of the J programs in order to make that more holistic, endeavor.
Yeah. So, I mean, for people so the JI is the most common problem everybody has done. I mean, the most common program everybody has learned. JR is the second most common one. And people tend to try to use those vertically like silos or independently and don't realize that you actually flow from working on one, then you get to a point where you use a different tool, and then you'll jump back to using you. So you go from JI to JR, back to JI, then to JM, then back to JI. It's a looping sort of operation. So let's see.
I think one thing on that last slide, it kind
I'll
of
go back up.
explains a lot of people that are working with Toyota Okada.
Yeah.
This kind of illustrates how the behavioral patterns as you're explaining them from the TWI programs really is a lot of the foundation of those patterns people utilize or Mike recognized in his research for Toyota Kata.
Yep. So the kata piece so Mike went out and basically tried to document the typical behavior of Toyota's experienced trainers. And he basically encapsulated, and he'll say they don't follow exactly the pattern, but here's the general pattern. So he's really trying to explain they're doing improv, and it always depends on the situation. But they're using all the tools, all the practice pieces that you should have learned if you've learned the TWI programs, all three of the programs, not just one.
So somebody just said, what improv, what you just said, improv.
Yeah.
I just popped in my head 3 eyes, improv, I can't think of them now.
Yeah. So it's really like jazz. I mean, jazz is like each thing plays off the next. So if you know all the patterns, you're going to react to what each one generates the next reaction. And this is what he has tried to do with the kata format. He's tried to get you to question and challenge things and then think about that and go back and take a look at it again.
So one was iterative cycles, improv, and I can't remember the third one as you mentioned it, but
okay.
That's key to learn, key to be successful with this as a more holistic system. You can meet any challenge.
Okay. So the other piece that I have noticed, and this is one of the books written, there's a group of about 60 old guys like me that have 40 plus years experience in Toyota, and I think they're doing them a favor. I mean, we're getting too old to stand the 8-10 hour a day rigor on the shop floor, but we still like to play in factories, and we want to be trainers, and we want to share our knowledge. So these guys are trainers, and they've written books, and this is one about training the first year supervisor. This is your leadership training program. And one of the interesting pieces they've done is they have turned the 5 needs upside down, and they focus on the knowledge pieces first, primarily about your responsibility as a leader for developing other people. But also as a leader, you must know the jobs that you're supposed to be training in. And so down here, they have the job instruction. It's almost close to what people have seen if they've gone through the current JI. The JR shifted about in the mid 90s. Toyota basically has cleaned it up, updated it, and made it more people centric, and also connected it very much with the responsibilities piece. And the job methods, it got supplanted about 1955 by Shingo. So the original job methods was supposed to be kind of an introductory piece to industrial engineering with no engineering nomenclature. And Shingo and Ono Ono knew he needed far more than just this really introductory JM to get his catching up with Ford thing. So he brought in Shingo, who taught some basic just basic industrial engineering, mostly layouts, process flows, time studies.
kind of a more macro look at the industrial engineering versus the micro of the original JM.
Yep. Well, the original, unfortunately, the only JM program that people are still doing is the one that the originators abandoned at the end of 1945. They wanted to improve it, but the War Department would not let them do it. They said your job is to focus on, getting war material out, not to improve the training process. And so in 1946, they totally revamped JM. They went in and started looking at it more as a holistic sort of piece. They also went in and put in one to do like the logistics, the layout, because they found that was a major impact. So I don't know anybody in the U.S., any training group that's actually training to the improved job methods program. So the early program that I had up that showed the loop, and I started thinking about it, Jim, when you asked me to put this together, and I realized when I go into companies and I get them to do things, I am actually doing a get ready stage. This is also what Toyota does. A person who's being developed as a leader to do the process improvements, to lead the people, they actually have a very long leadership development. There's a get ready part. And so I also use the first two S's. I don't use the last three or four or five or six or eight, whoever. I mean, people keep adding the S's. The first two give you the biggest improvement. And that's my get ready phase. I explain to people about here's the principles of flow, here's what Ono knew about. And we go from there. So overall, there's kind of a simplified improvement sequence. You really have to be aware of the tools, what they can do, your responsibilities, that sort of thing. You also have to know about flow, and you go out and you discover the flow and basically where the barriers are. And I begin to define my standards. And if I have a problem in an area, I begin to challenge that. I make an improvement. I go back out and see how did that impact the flow. I just keep going through this, looping it until I get a fairly smooth flow in an operation. And that's a little bit more detailed about what happens in each one of these stages.
In a way, which gets into in a way, it's kind of illustrating some of the iterative patterns of the kata steps.
It does. So, I mean, in the kata format, and when he was doing his same research, I was doing the same thing. I was breaking it down, and he wrote the book, and I turned around and did a pivot, and I says, okay, the kata pattern can help you look like what the masters did, but how do you get there? And so I started trying to find where did they figure those habits out? Where did they learn this? And I've detailed out there's 10 habits to do the improvement side of things, and the learning. And all of this are in functional pieces that you should be practicing when you're learning how to use the TWI skills. And then there are 2 coaching patterns. So I've documented a dozen patterns inside that feed the kata format. So questions? Anybody have a slide they want me to go back to?
Yeah, somebody did put on there actually a link. It looks like to an exchange in the scientific management community. So it looks like it's from many years back between Japan and the U.S. between Yoichi Uno and Frank Gilbreth, which might be interesting.
Yep. So he came over, he came in I think 1910 or 1911, and he met with Carpenter. Trying to remember there's like 5 or 6 people he met with that were trying to develop the flow concepts, including Gilbreth. And he went back and he translated a lot of this material, and he reorganized his first factory for flow about 1917. So this is his work is what not Shingo, but what Ono was seeing when he went and benchmarked another company.
Yeah, there's a
So,
lot actually in industrial community, even globally,
yeah,
US, North America, Europe, and even in Asia, more particularly probably Japan, there was a lot of sharing going on despite the more difficulty to communicate and travel back then. There was a lot of sharing in the overall industrial community.
yeah. So Gilbert passed away, and then his wife and her team actually went to Japan and taught about the one best way patterns and such that they were doing, the motion measurements and such. So
Yeah, we're kind of right here at our target time mark. So I don't know, is there some kind of maybe summary things? I think some of the things we could maybe even talked about up front would be that the programs are, like you said, they're not these separate silos. They're
right,
really programs, and I guess that's part of the even if you look at the TWI, they're trying to teach the supervisory skills, the leadership skills, which by default would kind of tell you should be somewhat holistic. And you kind of go through and show how these Toyota adapted this to their needs in kind of more holistic way. And I think a key thing is the fact that you don't use one and then the other, but you use components of each one depending on your circumstances. Kind of the old thing is a Toyota person, what do you do? And they say, well, it depends. And these are the skills to help you through that. It depends.
right. So are there any particular slides you would like me to put up and answer questions?
Somebody made a comment. Most people look at Toyota after 1950, but there's an interesting story earlier, which some of what you're going through, sharing some of that.
So this slide that's up there now is, gosh, let me see if I can get the book out. I think this one's like 2012. So this is still, I think this is like 2012 is when this one was done.
Yeah, somebody's asking if is there a place? Actually, it's Hugh. Hi, Hugh. If is there a place we can look up the more recent versions of JM?
No, I think that I have trained groups in Asia on the new JM. I've got all the manuals. That's almost another story. I'm more than willing and open to talk to people that want to learn it. And probably I need to put together a revised version and share it with people. So I'm wrong about this. This particular book is 2022. So this is only 3 years old, this book about the
Fairly recent. We keep iterating. Well, we are to our target time, and maybe we could do something another thing a little later. Maybe go into some of that JM in particular. There's some interest in that. Would be great. So I guess with that, Mark, thank you very much for doing this. Some great insight, and there's a lot more behind all this than we initially think, and most people are actually using. And with that, Skylar, I'll throw it back to you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Mark, thank you so much. Also, real quick, on April 1st and April 2nd, we do have the TWI and CAUTA Summits coming up in Noblesville, Indiana. There will also be workshops on March 31st, so just keep an eye out on your emails and updates for that. Mark, again, thank you so much, and we will see you all soon. Bye-bye.